everybody. This is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Scoop, the Uncensored Report. I get them all confused. Today is the 30th. It is Wednesday. This is a one-man operation. I do everything from running the production to the gathering of the data to the websites, every aspect of it. Truly one-man operation. Normally, I'll put you up on a split screen, but for some reason today, Facebook is not updating with stories that are current on there. So I thought I would just read it through. I'm able to get it on my phone, which is the weirdest thing. Alabama governor spends BP oil spill money to renovate beachfront house. That BP money was supposed to go to businesses that were economically damaged during the Gulf BP spill. Now, what's happening is this money's being doled out to the city. I know my own little city here has received their share, and they're deciding the direction that it should go in, saying that it impacted the city for tourism reasons, because you got the businesses that are getting in the cities, and we got just over $1 million. They said tourism impacted it, so they should be taking in that money and using it to, probably drive up tourism or do things around the city that'll make it look better, to increase tourism, all that good stuff, versus doing what this guy did, this Alabama governor, who went out and decided it made sense to renovate his mansion, which is just utterly ridiculous. Another story that was out there, dung patties. For some reason, this whole dung patty where they're selling them online in India just cracks me up. I don't know why, but every time I see it, it gives me a chuckle. There was another police-involved shooting in Mad Beach. That's right down the corner here in St. Pete, about 40 minutes down the road. I think that's like the second one in St. Pete in the last 2 days. So always tracking those, always concerned about them. Members of the University of Wisconsin. Okay, this is going into old news too. All right, so what we'll do is let's try pulling up my website and see if we can get stuff there. The Uncensored Report. I'm not sure why Facebook is not cooperating today, especially when you're in the middle of your production and you're trying to do your show and this stuff happens. Some of the stories I'm going to talk about right there on the screen, you see this video I'm going to play actually a little bit later. It's about that whole asset forfeiture, and I'm going to cover asset forfeiture and how the DOJ says, hey, we don't want to be a partner with the local police anymore in this because we're losing too much money, how that impacts you. We're going to cover this story too about the printing of money and how it's enslaving the middle class. What else do we got on here? The migrant crime is up. That's not unexpected in Germany with the migrant crime. Common sense there. I think everybody expected you're going to get an increase. I don't think they expected a 47% increase, which is a little astronomical. I love this story. The Easter Island Heads, I've always watched it. It's strange that we've never really tried to dig down deep into it, but look how large those things are. So they're finding out that it's more than just a head. You got the full-on body, and that story was a little interesting. That was at the uncensoredreport.com, my website. Turkey supports IS because they want to revive the Ottoman Empire. Now, keep in mind that is from RT, which is a Russian-based news organization. And we all know the issues that Russia and Turkey are going through right now. They just increased more sanctions Russia did against Turkey. And Turkey's got a million reasons why they want to help ISIS. A, they get that cheap oil. B, they're quelling the Kurd uprising. C, they're going after Assad. I mean, there's just a ton of reasons why it's advantageous for Turkey to do this, but then they can't bring it to the public's eye because it looks bad and it's counter to what NATO supposedly wants. Transgender fad rapidly spreading in primary schools, a cluster emerging as children copy Friends, which is, to me, alarming. That was an interesting story. Check it out. Another one about the rise of unemployment. I'm going to cover that one too, because what we're seeing is you don't have those full-time employees anymore. You got the temp-based employees, and with that, they're losing a lot of benefits. And so we're just going to delve into that and check it out a little bit. 3 kinds of people returning home after joining the Islamic State. Google how they're spying on you from K through 12. They're spying on you even after that, but this is an interesting Twitter says, hey, we're going to start cracking down on abuse and threats. And a lot of people are wondering if that's going to hold up. This is a little alarming. The U.S. carrier Harry Truman, Iran fired some rockets. They said they gave the United States, I believe it was something like 23 minutes notice that they were going to do live rounds firing. Then they fired them within 1,500 feet of the U.S. Truman, Harry S. Truman. A little alarming. A report that's out there, a lot of new major media is actually starting to pick it up. This is from an alternative side. Bill Gertz, he gets a lot of good stories. Excellent writer. And the Washington Free Beacon, and they're talking about how there's a lot of concerns that Russia is building up this phenomenal fleet of submarines, and not just the submarines, on the whole naval buildup. Some of the leaders in ISIS have been killed, including their mastermind. The string of orca deaths out at San Antonio SeaWorld renewed some concerns with people regarding the captivity of these orcas. It's been a concern for a long time. The economy, why people are essentially they don't have the jobs. The quality jobs aren't there. The people aren't owning houses. They're renting houses. We might cover that a little bit. And let's see. Democrats, this was actually a poll. Democrats came out and feared that Christians are a bigger threat than Muslims, which may explain why Obama's only let in, I think, one Christian out of all the Syrians that have come here. The rest have been essentially Sunnis, Muslims. Planned Parenthood under attack. They should be with some of their antics. Czech Republic, we're going to cover this guy too. He's saying that the refugees crisis is an organized invasion, and we're going to compare that to the organized invasion at our back door. How about this? $250,000 fine if you offend a transgender woman in New York City. But those are some of the stories. You can catch all of these at my site, theuncensoredreport.com, including the longevity, which I'm part of. If you click on that and you purchase through it, I get benefits from it. One of the ways that I'm trying to do the show, some of this other stuff is just some local and some AdSense ads where they rotate ads. It could be any kind of them, and they don't get any say into what I talk about or communicate on this show. So let's go ahead and talk about some other stuff that I said I wanted to opine. Those are your basic headlines that are out there. One of the last stories there was the Czech Republic and how the influx of refugees in Europe is considered a organized invasion. And you have this president come out, Milo Zeman. He addressed this whole subject of the European migrant crisis, and he called it the wave of refugees an organized invasion. He said that they're basically facing this invasion, and it's a spontaneous movement of refugees. And he says, look, I get why everybody defends refugees and their rights, and they're out of compassion, out of solidarity. I get that. But the compassion is possibly from the old, infirm, and primarily the little kids. It's not for these guys that are of fighting age. And they're finding that the overall majority of these people are of fighting age. And this guy's saying, look, why aren't you staying there and fighting for your own country? Why are you coming here? You're of fighting age. You should be there and standing up for your country, not running. And what he did is he drew a comparison between the male refugees fleeing the Middle East and the Czechs who fled his country, or their country, back when the Nazis occupied it. Instead of staying there and fighting the occupiers, they ran. Now, this is the same guy. He's taking a pretty hard line on refugees. You know, he's not going to be part of the quota system. He's backed out of it. You know, you also have, it's next to Hungary, who's built that huge fence there, which has done a great job at preventing the influx of refugees coming into their country. It's the whole concept of a gate, which is something that Trump has even issued here for the United States, which alarmed a lot of individuals out there. Primarily, major media made a big deal out of it, and the Democrats. But this whole issue of securing the border against unrestricted entry, it's a hot topic. It apparently worked in Hungary. It's something they want to try here. But they say that, you know, many critics say, hey, it's just going to encourage border jumping. And then, it's gonna be hard to enforce our laws, our border laws. And I sit here scratching my head. Really? They're walking across now. So what? We got to make. If we make it harder and they got to jump over the fence, that's a problem. But this whole problem with the border, it's a direct and predictable result of President Obama, his administration, and the fact that they've announced that they will not enforce immigration laws essentially out there, especially with all these foreign youth that are coming over. And it's basically an organized invasion, just like this Czech president over here, Zeman. What's the big difference? It's essentially the same, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's in Europe or the United States. Thousands of aliens are ignoring the country's borders and entering illegally. And this should not be allowed to happen. One of the primary barriers that Europe's facing right now is this Schengen agreement, which effectively got rid of border controls. And that's why Germany, France, and everyone's saying, oh, you got to let it flow. We got this agreement. And luckily for us, we don't have it. People have tried it, but we've rejected it, and it's gotten nowhere. And, this invasion is still occurring, folks, at our southern border. We're just not hearing about it. I think I put out a couple numbers just the other day. It's still an issue. Now, instead of being Sunni Muslims with this track record with the whole ISIS background and Al-Qaeda, which are Sunnis, these are probably Christians and Catholics coming across to South America, which is the majority. Some Sunnis are sneaking in. But you get the gist of it. Now, the next thing I did want to talk about, and I thought this was interesting, and it's an article that we put out, and this guy, Michael, basically hit the nail on the head when he was talking about the economy and the types of jobs that are out there. And it's a lot of the jobs in the economy are driven by such programs, regulations, if you want to call it, such as Obamacare, where essentially if you reach the 50 employee mark, you got to pay out all this extra money. So I know there's a lot of people out there, they'll stop at 49 employees and then they'll make the other individuals temporary or contractors. And this story came out and basically said that employees are disposable anymore. They found that employers have found that they can make a lot of money if they essentially turn their workers into a temporary force. And according to this report, there are 17 million independent workers out there that represent the share of the workforce. And the federal laws, they give protection to full-time workers. They don't give them to these contracted workers. Temp workers, they don't get health insurance. They don't get vacation time. They don't get retirement benefits. They don't get their full 40 hours. They're paid for a limited amount of time. And a limited pay, and it's a position that can be disposed of immediately if the employer doesn't feel they're necessary. And not that that's bad. Like this guy said, you always need that role. You're going to need temp workers. You're going to need contractors, but it's becoming the majority of the workforce. Instead of full-time workers, they're replacing them with these temps. And they're the working poor, what he's referred to in this article. And he's got a ton of sources in here. And like I said, will always be a need for temp workers. You got people. You got jobs that are short term. You need people to come in and just work those jobs and then be gone. But today, a lot of these large and wealthy corporations are out there purposely getting rid of full-time employees and bringing in independent contractors to do the exact same job. And why are they doing this again? They skirt Obamacare. They skirt retirement. They skirt vacation pay. They don't have to generally pay as much. And I agree with most of you, what you're probably thinking, that this is disgusting. It's alarming. How can executives make these decisions and sleep at night? But they do it. When you go from being a full-time employee to temp status, it changes your life dramatically. Don't they understand it? Don't they get it? Don't they care? No, they don't. They're looking at their bottom line, their economy. This report says that our economy is not producing many of those jobs. Instead, most growth has been in the low-paying service area. And he gets some numbers out here to support it. I'll just read a couple of them. This week we learned that for the first time ever recorded, middle-class Americans make up the minority of the population. Minority, 61%. That's amazing. According to the Pew Research Center, the median income in households has declined 4%. According to the Pew 2, they found that the median wealth for a middle-class household dropped by an astonishing 28%. So a lot of alarming numbers here, folks. And this just further exemplifies the issue that we're having with this temp workforce versus full-time. And like I said, a lot of it's the bottom line is driving it. Some of it's regulations like Obamacare. Is there a solution? I don't think there's a solution. You know, this report calls it the 1099 economy, 1099 being the independent contractor. And they're referring to it as the 1099 economy. And it's a shame that we've gone to that. But it's a sign of the times. Sign of the times. And that's where we would go right into the housing pricing. Soaring house prices and decent paying jobs. I was out before the show. I was out doing some surfing. I decided to catch a dawn patrol this morning at the North Jetty in Venice, Florida. Or Nokomis. And nice waves. Some chest, head high. Nice little sets. Got out there for like 3 hours. I was talking to a buddy. And he's a firefighter, lieutenant here in Sarasota. And he was telling me that he sold his house and he was going to buy another house, but he's having a hard time finding it. He was looking on the island. He couldn't believe that just the land alone is going for $400,000 on this island in Venice. And that's because the pricing, the real estate market here, especially on the island of Venice, is so inflated. It's a bubble waiting to burst. And you're seeing this throughout the nation. And what you have is your youngest generation of adults out there they're all missing a chance to go out and start their life, to buy their house, to live their dreams, to become real grown-ups. And it's not just a case of fixation of the vapid social media, cultural decline, or laziness. You know, you hear that all the time about millennials. There's a definite problem with economic realities of the day that are out there, such as the workforce, the jobs that are out there, which I just covered. The housing and rent prices have soared. They're through the roof, especially here in Venice, Sarasota. Rental market is ridiculous. I don't know how most people can afford to live. And it's sad. You know, I get people all the time write me. I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. I can only afford $800 a month. I need an apartment. Good luck finding that out here. And that's the market that's been created because the housing and renting prices are soaring through the roof. Along with that increase of cost of living. I don't care what Obama says or the government says about inflation. I've covered it before. If you've heard on the show, you know, when they take inflation, they'll sit there and they'll cherry pick numbers. They'll have 300 numbers. They'll cherry pick 30 numbers that are good. That'll give them their 1.2 or 3, whatever the inflation rate is. And they'll say there's no inflation. It's in check. And because the government's telling us this, and the Bushes did it too, we go, oh, okay, then everything's normal. But it's not normal. Go to Publix. I go to Publix shopping. My bill is through the roof, my grocery bill. Inflation is here, folks. It's been here for years. But the government sits there and they think, hey, we could tell them there's no inflation. Hey, they'll accept that there's no inflation because that's the way it is. Obama said it. Let's believe it. This article goes into the whole student loan debt that's absolutely crushing America. And I think I put out something by the HuffPost saying why many people are just not paying it. But it's going to get you in trouble because now you owe the government. But this is more and more about the decent lifestyles of the middle class that are no longer decent. They're no longer the norm. They're now out of reach for most Americans. And thus you have a massive wave of arrested development and immaturity. It's been bred at the hands of the old bankers. You know, those guys. And this report says home ownership is at its lowest, 63.7%. That's the lowest since 1960, folks. And it's not just the millennials. You're having this with traditional homeowners. Families, couples, they're being displaced because of the current market conditions, because of the housing pricing, because of the rental pricing. They've all been driven up sharply by Wall Street speculators and cheap QE credit. It's creating a huge bubble that's endangering the whole economy. Meanwhile, the jobs recovery is abysmal. It's deteriorated. I don't care what they say the employment rate is. You got to look beyond those numbers. Quality of job, what they're paying, what type of jobs are opening, all that good stuff. You know, it's easy to just throw a number out there and say, oh, okay, the economy's great. Inflation's in check. Unemployment's in check. The economy's great. But the problem is just tilted. It's like a tilted table towards the rich. A generation of millennials are of spoiled and decadence. And never leave your phone on when you're doing a show. But it made me lose my thought. But you get the gist here, folks. Even though the government paints a rosy picture, it's not as rosy as they paint it. And you need to look beyond all the clutter they're throwing out there, all the confusion, because it's not as rosy as they always try to put it. Okay, now we're going to cover asset forfeiture. This is interesting, and I'm going to cover how the DOJ has changed, and then we're going to go into this video. It's an interesting video from Dave out at InfoWars. It's about 5 minutes, but it covers how asset forfeiture, and he really goes in depth on it. It's great production quality versus out of my back office of my house. The DOJ asset sharing note, something that I think I communicated a week ago or something when it came out. And basically, they're citing significant cuts in their budget, which came about with the recent spending bill, and that the Department of Justice is going to suspend the program of sharing assets seized, which has been an incredible profit for the local police officers. And they call it the Equitable Sharing Program. And what it basically does is it gives incentives out there to your local police, local enforcement, to pursue criminals under federal law rather than the applicable state laws. It's a procedural decision that paves the way for police to just rake in millions of dollars. And you'll hear from David. It was a great analogy. You know, basically you could get pulled over. They could take your money. They could say, oh, we're going to dust it for cocaine and try getting that money back. Maybe 10, 20% of the people get the money back after spending a ton of money fighting the police on it. It's almost as though it's highway robbery. And this guy, they come out here, this day person, he laminates a loss of about $1.2 billion is what the DOJ is losing to local sheriffs with this shared program, this partner program. They're like, we can't do that anymore, especially with the new spending bill out there. So we got to cut it. Obviously, $1.2 billion, that's going to impact the local police significantly, especially the ones that are using the federal programs as a reason to obtain your assets. And you might think, oh, this is ridiculous, you're Mr. Conspiracy. I'm telling you, if a cop knocks on my door right now, he comes in, he sees $10,000 on my desk. Why do you have $10,000? That's not normal to have $10,000 in cash, which in my mind is very normal. Who wants to keep it in a bank? They can take it. And good luck getting it back. It'll take me many years and many court battles to get that money back. But they came out, and this day guy had a closed letter pleading with the police departments and saying, hey, look, you guys, I know you relied on this money. Times are changing, challenging times, and so we're going to have to stop it. Forget the fact that it's challenging times. How about the constitutionality of it? The due process that's gone with it. It's a bullshit law. And this guy covers some of the important assets. He says civil asset forfeiture procedures are based on the premise that person's property can be complicit in the commission of a crime, which is, laughable at the least. And the Constitution was specifically written to protect citizens, as we all know, from this type of action. But he goes in, he covers the civil asset forfeiture and the different scenarios of which they can gain it. They can one of the programs they can use it on is electronic surveillance. Stingray. Now, here locally, the ACLU went in, they sued the Sarasota Police Department for using Stingray. And I thought Northport was part of that too. I thought that's what the ACLU put out, but Northport is saying no to that. So it's a good thing that they're taking away, they're not sharing this anymore, but they need to do away with it altogether. And it's just deplorable. It's what about fundamental liberties, folks? The power of government to come in and do this and encourage state legislators to pass laws curtailing civil asset forfeiture programs in their states. We need to get them to do. We need some due process put back in place. We need to grab the bull by the horns and tell the government we're not taking it anymore. All right, we're going to do a quick break, and I'll be right back. This is Longevity. Remember, it's something that I can make some money on. If you buy minerals, excellent minerals and vitamins, I get mine through them. Check it out. Click the link on my website, theuncensoredreport.com. Okay, I have the short feature. It's a short video report. It'll take about 5 minutes. I'm going to put you on the big screen and take a listen, and you'll see me after the report is done.
Now, let's take a look at the drug war. This is an old running drug war, but we need to understand how this is coming to us and what it is doing to destroy our society. Look at these two stories real quickly. Now, when we look at the old war on drugs, we just had our drugs czar say it is a complete failure. Nevertheless, like Chris Christie, he wants to continue to prosecute it. He's someone who understands that there's a medical treatment side to it, but he wants to prosecute it. And what we need to look at is how it has totally corrupted our law enforcement, for example. Two stories focusing on that one aspect of the failed war on drugs. This particular one from the Institute of Justice: cops seized over $107,000 from a couple, and they didn't charge them with a crime. These people were speeding, they pulled them over, they say a drug dog sniffed and indicated on the car, so then they searched the car and found $107,000. Now, the people say that it was taken from savings and from a disabilities payment. They were on their way to get treatment for their son. Nevertheless, after 3 years, they've not been able to recover that cash. This is yet another case. There's been 62,000 seizures since 9/11 where the police did not use warrants, did not even charge the owners with the crime, but just stole the cash. And of course, it's very prevalent in Illinois where this took place. They said they've received more than $186 million in federal forfeiture. They call it a civil forfeiture because they don't press charges against you. They don't give you your due process. But look at how it has corrupted the police. We've got a case that was in the Drudge Report today. Bal Harbor Police giving millions to Caracas in drug money. Connections to the president there, President Maduro. This village police force broke the law, said a former top DEA agent. They wired drug money to known drug traffickers and money launderers. They say they sent drug money to a well-known trafficker, a cash smuggler, a money launderer, more than $4 million in all. Where does a small-town police department come up with this kind of money? It's absolutely amazing to see this story. They say in spite of U.S. warnings about the emergence of the country as a major hub for cocaine, that'd be Venezuela, the police never investigated the people to whom they were sending millions in drug proceeds, including a host of individuals with criminal records. They say It's absurd. You're a Bal Harbour police officer. Your jurisdiction is local, said a former DEA chief from New York. He said they were just laundering money for the sake of laundering money. Yeah, you know, like HSBC and UBS, these big banks who laundered money. They even gave the Sinaloa cartel their own checkout window, HSBC did. What did they get for that? A very small slap on the wrist, a very small fine. I don't think you're even going to see that happen to this police department. Now, they say among the recipients was a guy named William Amaro, a 48-year-old assistant to President Maduro, a longtime friend of his. He got $45,000 on one day. The next day, they did it again. He got $37,000. 4 more times the cops sent money to his account. $250,000 nearly in all. And as I pointed out before, that was $4 million. They say, making the payments all the more remarkable, the U.S. government was then conducting investigations into the Venezuelan government leaders' involvement in the drug trade, especially the criminal groups using the nation as a shipping point. They say U.S. studies show that 24% of cocaine produced in South America channeled through that company. Now, here's the bottom line. This is an undercover sting operation run by a tiny, small police department in Bal Harbour, small town. It generated millions of dollars, however, for that police task force, and they never made a single arrest. Of course, they got the money. As one lawyer in South Florida said, I can't think of a more podunk town than Bal Harbour. Not in a bad way, but in the sense that these cops would have otherwise been stopping traffic and shooting radar, as if we really need them to do that. He says, in reality, they were being money launderers. The minute they started doing busts, it would have been all over. But of course it wasn't. It was simply about corrupting the police. And that's what we've seen with the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs. Understand, it's not getting anybody off of drug addiction.
Okay, that ended a little bit earlier than the 5-minute mark. And you might be wondering, why was David talking all about asset forfeiture? He was talking about asset forfeiture because that all essentially evolved out of this war on drugs, as did a lot of other things that have taken place out there that we have seen as a society. And what civil asset forfeiture really is armed robbery by the police. You know, and here's another example of the story I just pulled up. 3 years ago, a couple was stopped by an armed gang, robbed for $100,000. The facts are not in dispute. And this armed gang ended up being police because they thought this person should not have $100,000. But it's civil asset forfeiture, so we can go ahead and take it, and good luck getting that money back. And a lot of people, I don't think, are aware of this in society, and it's just a sham. Just a sham. The more I think of it, the more egregious. And, you know, and it's just as egregious as this law that just came out in California. Starting in January 1, in a few days, California may confiscate firearms from gun owners thought to be of a danger to themselves or others. Who's going to determine that? No due process? You're going to say I'm a danger to you? You're going to come in and take my weapon? This is all due to a GVRO bill, Gun Violence Restraining Orders, which goes into effect, like I said, on January 1st. And basically, according to this document, it could be issued without prior knowledge to a person. So you're not going to know what's happening. They can issue it. Judge will say, here's the order, because the prosecutor or Joe Smith came in and said Frank Abbruzzino is a danger to society, and they could come in and take away your gun. No judge, no jury. That's it. Confiscated. Without any notice, due process, due diligence. Nothing like that, folks. You should be alarmed. You should be concerned. You know, and right now, California already has laws on the book that bans people from possessing guns if they've committed violent crimes or they're involuntarily committed to a mental facility. But this GVR goes a step further. It allows judges to bar people from possessing arms even if they have not committed a violent crime or just for any reason they make up. And I'm not sure how this is passing the mustard. I mean, were people sleeping when that came up? It's crazy. It's crazy time over there in California. Well, it's always crazy time over there in California, but it's crazy time over there in Illinois too. Let me pull up this next story where this gun control in Illinois. How about Virginia? Virginia says we're not going to go ahead and recognize any of your concealed carries. You're not going to recognize my concealed carry from Florida? Are you kidding me? Illinois, they're seeking a resolution to seizure of privately owned weapons. This resolution, it was introduced at the Illinois State Legislature. It threatens the natural and fundamental rights of citizens in their state to bear arms, just like this California one. It's non-binding. It's called the House Resolution 855, and it urges the courts, especially the Supreme Court, to adhere to the clear wording of the Second Amendment. And what they're relying on is it being for the right afforded to state-sponsored militias and not individuals. So they're saying that whole Second Amendment is there because of militias, not individuals. And the text of the proposal recites a section of dissidents from John Paul Stevens, and this was a case of District of Columbia versus Heller. It was handed out by the Supreme Court in 2008, and they're relying heavily on that agreement. But this author, he came in, he makes some misstatements, that the father, he's basically stating that the father's intent regarding the Second Amendment was not for individuals. It was not for self-support, it was for militias. I don't even know if, look, we have the Declaration of Rights included in Pennsylvania State Constitution back, 1776, that all people have the right to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state. It's irresponsible for John Paul Stevens, a sitting justice on the Supreme Court, to ignore that and just make out his own little arbitrary laws out there. Or how about this author in Illinois that's trying to come up there? There's no evidence to support his assumption that it's for militias. But this is the extreme that gun control advocates are going to get the weapons away. Well, there's even worse extremes, like the government buying up a ton of ammunition that they don't need. Why does the EPA need 100,000 bullets? But a lot of these groups are using backdoors to achieve their objective, gun control. Last thing, I don't know when I started this show, so I have no idea how long I've been talking. I wanted to talk about this a little bit yesterday, and it's that whole Ferguson effect on the increase in violent crime that we're seeing out there. And I'm just wondering, I tell you what, let me take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I'm working from two computers, so a lot of times I'll go looking for data, and I knew I wanted to talk about Ferguson. I have a note to talk about Ferguson, but it was on another computer, and I have to flip back and forth. And so we had to go get that. I had to find it real quick. And basically, it's a Word document. It has some links that I want to pull up, and I've pulled all 5 up. And I tend to bounce between links as I'm talking, gathering different information. But primarily it's off this one article. It talks about the whole Ferguson effect and how it's blamed for the increase in violent crime. We have to blame someone, right? It's the Ferguson effect. So James Corney, he's the FBI director. He came out in a speech. He said that most of 50 cities out there have seen an increase in homicides, especially Chicago, right? And shootings this year. In Chicago, I got to tell you, have some of the most stringent gun control laws. People are dying left and right there. But But you've seen a lot of homicides and shootings out there this year. And in today's, what they call YouTube world, the officers are reluctant to get out of their cars and do work that controls a violent crime. Our officers answering 911 calls, avoid the informal contact that keeps the bad guys standing around, especially with their guns. Or playing games. I think I put out yesterday, a cop got busted playing games and didn't respond to 911 calls. But this is such bull. Look, if you're trained appropriately, you get out of your car, you go and handle the situation appropriately. The only reason you should be afraid about YouTube is if you're an idiot cop that's going out there and abusing individuals' rights. After all, you got a freaking camera on you. Well, which should be on most of the time. Most of these guys turn them off for some reason. But what's the big deal? If you're trained properly and you're doing stuff per code, what do you care if there's a guy with a phone there? What do you care if your camera's on you? And when I hear people cry like this and say the Ferguson effect, all I can think is, what are you doing out there? How are you handling your job out there in the streets? Now, Obama says this is a little bit different. He accused his FBI director of cherry-picking data to make a case for his own political agenda, something Obama's never done. But there's this, May McDonald, he published a piece in the Wall Street Journal, and it basically came out and it revealed that there's an unnerving impact that depolicing by the police. And what they're calling it is the Ferguson effect. And that's why you're seeing the increase in crime, because officers are more reluctant to get in there and do anything over the fear that they won't be able to control themselves, that they'll be viewed incorrectly, that they'll pull out. I just put, so some of these, I just get amazed all the time. Like this officer that got out of the car up in Cleveland, Cuyahoga Falls, I forget his name now, was with Tamir Rice. His camera conveniently was off. Within seconds, before getting out of the car, his gun was out of his holster. And he's shooting this 12-year-old, 7 times? And then nothing happens to him. They blame the media, they blame the Ferguson effect, they blame the YouTubers out there. How about looking at yourself? How about police departments being more accountable? Coming up with a program that teaches these officers, trains these officers to be more effective patrolmen. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? I mean, a lot of families out there, they're reluctant to go near police. They're afraid of them. Could that be why there's more homicides? Because people aren't calling police as much? Because they're afraid they might get shot? Like the grandmother did just the other day? Is it too much of a stretch that the founders of Black Lives Matters, this Marxist group out there, might just have one of these manuals in their library where they go out and do the right thing? Is it too much to suggest that their intimate familiarity with the declared goals of communism, which are published in the Congressional Record, would lead them to include police departments? That's part of the issue too. How they're targeting the police officers. Black Lives Matter is a pretty extreme group. But you're seeing this stuff all the time, and I've even done it. I've sat there with a camera. Or I've opined on the show about officers that have come out. I believe they've violated my constitutional rights. From when I was just at the Trump rally, and the lady told me I couldn't film her outside. It ends up she was a TSA in a sheriff's outfit. But it happens all the time, and I think most of it, I don't think it's this YouTube Ferguson effect. I'm not buying in on it. I think officers need the appropriate training. I think you need some action to be taken against officers, disciplinary action, when they commit these crimes, when they violate a person's rights. I don't think they're harsh enough now. When a cop can go out and essentially murder somebody and get away with it, They know it now. It seems like every day officers are getting away with murdering individuals. And they shouldn't be. And doing little things, like here in Venice, an officer told a lady she couldn't hand out flyers, political flyers, on a public street. He was wrong. So how about a familiarity with the laws? Learn the laws that you're trying to enforce. Nothing happened to that officer. He wasn't disciplined. Just like the officer that told me I couldn't stand in a city council center. When there's no rules like that, I checked the fire marshal, checked the city council, checked everywhere. Nothing would happen to that guy. No, I don't think they did. Nobody said anything to me. Nothing was communicated, so he's probably out there violating some other individuals. Accountability, discipline at the police stations, local police stations. We really need that, folks. All right, I have no idea what time I started. I'm a little behind because I did go surfing this morning, and if you could tell, I didn't really prepare for the show that well. Usually I'll prepare in the morning, and you know what? I said I'm going to go out and give myself some tasty waves. I was a 16-year-old surfer boy again, which I enjoy. It's great exercise. So tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I'm not going to be on the air. I have to do the job that actually pays the bills because this doesn't pay anything, believe it or not. And then New Year's Day on Friday. So my next show will be on Monday. This has been Francesco Abbruzzino. Remember to stop by the uncensoredreport.com. Remember to purchase Longevity for your minerals and vitamins. And everybody have a great New Year.